Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined, our live show. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for giving us an hour. Kassidy and I are going to give you the best hour that we can give you and then get everybody out of here. You can go back about your day. And everybody, welcome Kassidy Carpenter. She is the Director of Global Events for World Fuel Services, and I'm excited to pick her brain today. Kassidy, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for this.
Yeah, glad you're here for this topic. I know that when you and I talked, we talked about a bunch of things, but this kind of came up and then we just kind of ran into this as like would be a great topic to talk about. So today, first thing we're going to get into is we're going to talk about experiential, right? And I think the idea of this topic is that in the trade show and event world, brand activation world, that whole space, right? Experiential gets thrown around a lot. It just gets thrown out. It's literally been kicked by the horse 100 times. It's beaten, it's dying, it's laying on the ground, right? So what we're going to try to do today is really talk about what does it actually mean? How can you execute it? What does it look like? And essentially, what are some of the changes that are going on in events that are actually being experiential? So one of the first things I did, Kassidy, just to kick us off is the actual definition of experiential. First of all, it's an adjective and it's related to, derived from, or providing experience. Pretty straightforward, right? So what I want to know from you is when you hear the word experiential, like what's your thought? All these years of doing events, all years in your career, what do you think when you hear experiential?
Well, first, I don't roll my eyes. I know a lot of you might these days. Just a little side joke. I love the word experience, but I feel it is kind of getting overused a little bit. I think people are throwing it around a lot, but I did the same thing you did, Matt. I went to the core definition first.
Yep.
And when I hear experiential, well, where I was kind of going with it, basically to me, it's anything that leaves an impression, an event or an occasion, something that happens that leaves an impression on you. And then one of the next things I did to prepare for this, if there's one thing I've kind of learned over the years is to always ask everyone who's smarter than you for guidance, input. So I went to a lot of our sales team, some of my, trusted coworkers, collaborators, all, and just sort of asked similar questions. And it's funny that they all come back with a similar definition. My question was, what separates an event experience from just an ordinary go to a trade show, or
Yeah.
what elevates it to be an experience? And some of them came back with very basic, something that leaves an impression, something I remembered, it was a feeling. But then some of them came back with very specific. One of my team members who I love dearly, she sent me a picture of her riding a bull from like 10 years ago at one of
Nice.
our events. And she said, this is my experience. And she's so
Nice.
cute. She's on the bull and she waited an hour and a half to get on that thing at an event and still
Yeah.
has it. So in its simplest, form, that made an impression on her. And I'm sure in some way she associates that with our company or the organizer that put it on or whoever the brand was, if they were, doing their job well, that she equates those together. So when you ask people, they usually can pinpoint something that made an impression. And it could be a big event like riding on a bull. It could be
Mhm.
something I had people say, that sushi that we had 3 years ago at the happy
Mm.
hour
Yeah.
before the blah, I can't stop thinking about it. And I'm like, that's amazing. So I think it has a wide range, right?
Yeah.
Of the way that you interpret experience.
Agreed. What I think one of the misconceptions for me with experiential in the trade show event brand activation space is people constantly view it as like a physical, a game, a technology, a thing that you have to do for your audience, right? Like that kind of They're like, oh, we want an experiential element. People are always saying. And I
Right.
think yeah. Yeah, like a VR headset or a technology or like a Jeopardy game that's in right. So those that's how people kind of see it. And I think it's not that those things are not experiential. They are. But I would argue that it's misconceived that way. And essentially, I've seen companies who put and no offense to anyone has ever done this, it doesn't make it a bad thing, but like a putt-putt mat in their booth. And then they're like, that's an experiential thing. Okay, But my thought on this is like what you're saying about the bull riding and things. Like, I made the note of saying like people remember good and bad experiences. They do. And that is experiential to me. Like you're saying impressions, very in line with what I'm thinking, which like people remember the good, people remember the bad. They don't really remember the in between. And I think the other piece of this that I'm thinking is like experiential, like people remember stories. And that to me is like concepts and themes and narratives and things that live and run in and around through events. So I think there are a lot of ways to deliver experience or to be experiential at your trade show. I made just a small list here. So run with me on this and tell me what you think about them. One, I think, is small touches and gestures, right? So when you have an event, those touch points, those cool little things that you can do for people, I think is experiential and often just gets grazed over. Two is like activities. You talk offsite activities and different things that go on, or hotel onsite things, the sessions that you run, right? Like we're having our event that you're coming to. I think those sessions are going to be experiential. Activations. I saw someone in the chat talking about brand activations, right? Like, so those activations can be experiential. Games, technology, and then I put theme and storytelling. And I think what ties all of those together, and I want to get your thoughts on this exactly, is in my opinion, all of those things can be experiential, but it all is about the customer and the audience that you're pertaining to, which is, I think, what people miss sometimes, is understanding who is that audience, who are those people, and curating any one of those laundry lists is what makes that impression, is what makes that experience.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Like one of our differentiators when I go to start planning is we measure it against, and I'll just use X company as my company. Only X company can blah, like an experience you couldn't buy. Like you could buy a ticket to get on a boat and go around the Statue of Liberty, but you can't go to a night out with a bunch of Food Network chefs and have that set up for you. Anyway, exactly what you're saying. There's a million different ways. So we had to come up with some language around like what means experience for us. And then the third one of that is understanding what your customer or your client, in my case, my client a lot of times is my sales team. So they are the ones, my job is to make their selling easier, like to create these GP driving memorable experiences so they can walk in and do the hard stuff. Like I always joke with them that like I just get to make things look good. Like they have to actually come in and like network, and thankfully, they love their customers more than I've seen anyone do. But so they have to know them, and then I have to know my client who is the salesperson, and then we have to tailor it to that. And that's hard. I mean, and we had spent a long time talking about the difference between an experience at a trade show and an experience at an offsite event or say a conference, when you have a little more control over who's been invited and you might know their preferences like a little better. But at a trade show, then how does that experience look? Is it a free for, like, it's to the masses. So you might not know exactly what you're up against, but I think the knowing of the audience is probably the hardest to me.
Yeah. So I see in the chat here, Harris wrote, if you're not designing your event around your audience, you're wasting your money. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's really interesting, Kassidy, what you just said about sometimes you're viewing that your audience is like your sales team. Like, yes, you have an end audience and you have customer, but you're viewing, which I think this is fascinating, is essentially as an event marketer and running events, you're basically viewing it. How do I set up my sales team for the easiest, most frictionless, the ability to deliver an experience to their customer who is yours as well? So walk me through that process with you. Like, how do you work with the sales team to be able to deliver that for them?
Yeah, it's one of the joys of my job, actually. And I get to work with teams in different countries even. So then you can elevate that. It's not just US based, or, you're learning. So I almost have two separate, not to-do lists, but like for lack of a better word, you have all the things that need to happen for your event to make it amazing. You need a stand space, you need an offsite, you need a meeting room, blah, 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 catering. And then you have a separate list for the sales team that's attending. They need hotel. I have lists of like what their favorite snacks are, or things that might make them feel more comfortable. And then we set up different, there's an event page for the internal team so they know what time they need to be somewhere. All those questions that aren't meant for the external audience. So it's almost like running parallel events. And that way, I mean, my end goal is when they show up to the stand or the conference, that they're not stressed about, are the lights going to be on? Do we have enough chairs? Is there a coffee machine? Like all those things that they might worry about, or not worry about, but like if I wasn't there, then they can show up and they are ready. Like,
Yeah.
we talked about our sports background. I love the coach like analogy. And for me, it's like, I'm so like joyful when I get to see them going out and like doing business. Like, I don't, it's like ridiculously nerdy, but I just like, I'm like, go guys, go,
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what
you had mentioned to me when we first talked, I kind of asked you like what you love about your job and what you love about events. And I wrote this down because I thought it was really great. You said you love watching the team do business.
I
Right.
do.
So, yeah. So you feel like you are sort of like orchestrating, setting the stage, setting them up for success, understanding your end customer, understanding your sales team and what they need to do to succeed, and then seeing it all kind of come together. And I think for me, that's a very high level thought in the sense that where a lot of event marketers need to get. They need to get out of the idea that they have to execute and get everything perfect and done right. Yes, that has to happen, but really good event marketers are doing that. Plus the
Right.
side of like, wow, I'm watching this sort of orchestra, this business all come together. And oftentimes I think going back to experiential, you're doing it by curating an experience for your customer and setting your team up for success, delivering that experience.
Yeah, exactly. And even then it evolves like in the first few years of your career, maybe you're learning to execute, you're learning to do it flawlessly. There's always going to be issues, and then you sort of evolve to this scenario where you're simultaneously serving these two groups. And now, just like within the last like 4 or 5 months, as we're going down the experiential
Yeah.
path, I'm even realizing that they're not all created equal. Like now we have a formula for find a great venue that people can't get into, load it up with entertainment, photo, great food, XYZ. There's a formula to it. Check it off. They're going to have a great time. But is
Yeah.
that true memorable experience? Like last
Yeah.
2 weeks ago in New York, I did 2 nights of events. One was a Food Network chef night using all the connections I had, like to create this evening where they were going and like watching like these people from TV cook and then interact with them and do FaceTimes. And the
Yeah.
next night we did something on top of the rock which is also an exclusive venue, but it was a party like setup and it was also great, but two very different
Yeah.
feelings,
Yep.
and now I'm like thinking just how do you evolve even beyond
Yeah.
what is really a true experience?
In here, I'm reading what Harris wrote. It says, before I plan the messaging for a trade show, I read the association's periodicals to learn what is top of mind for their members. I design my messaging around that and share that with the sales team. I mean, yeah, like I think that's a good example, Harris, of like really good preparation, understanding what is top of mind. I think what a lot of this funnels back to for me, and even what you're saying, Kassidy, which is essentially you're doing these activations, you're doing these offsite, but you're saying, how do I step them up even further? And for me, like I just constantly think that the devil is in the details. So it goes back into the audience and goes back into the customer. And where I've seen people get in trouble and where I've constantly, and we are always trying to get people to think differently, is you have to kind of separate what you want and what you think is cool versus what the audience really wants, right? Because I think it's easy to just plan cool stuff and let it go. But
Yeah.
when you can really dig into who they are at their core, why they're there, what they want, the way they learn, what they're seeking, that's when you can start to deliver those things rather than delivering them useless or meaningless things that you may think are great, but they don't hit the nail on the head. They're like, I don't need this, or it doesn't do it for me.
Yeah. And where do we get that information? How do we get it? Who's responsible for it? Where do we
Yeah.
store it? Like all of these things kind of go beyond the capacity. And I'm sure that much like everyone on this call probably is running a very lean team. If you work
Always.
for a big company,
Always.
you're probably one or two running an events,
Yeah.
so you might not be able to dig into every attendee and find out what color Skittle they like, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think this is a big hole too in the market that I'm finding. I mean, yes, is there Salesforce? Does everybody use it? No, I think this is a challenge.
So I think it's great that you've identified that as a challenge, because I think there's like some areas. Let's just walk down that a little bit. I think I would recommend to event marketers like really having more in-depth conversations with your sales team about the audience. Like, don't give me their profile, right? Tell me, who are they though? Like if someone said to me, give me the profile of an event marketer, I have a pretty cued in idea of the type of people event marketers are. Now, yes, they're all different, but there are some pretty set things about them at this point. And I think you have to know those. So working with sales is one of them. And then two, I would say, is talking to them. Your best customers, the people you trust when you're out at events. Why not ask them? You know, why not have that discussion? Because then I think that dials you into curating experience and being able to deliver the things that they're, what are they seeking? What do they really want? What are they not getting elsewhere? What are they not getting at events? What are they not getting from your competitors that you can be the one that you can deliver?
Right. And for me, the next step is also recording that somehow,
Yeah.
you know,
Yep.
because you're internalizing that information. And then I need to be in better habit. You know, we need to have a process where
Yeah.
then we document it. One of the things that Disney, we did one of their training courses one time, and one of the things they have all over the parks are these things called listening posts. And
Mm-hmm.
they're people, they're humans that are
Wow.
stationed,
Yeah.
and they're just meant to listen as people walk by, and you hear those little comments like, and then they record like what is happening. So in my dream world, I'd love that on a trade show
Yeah.
floor, like having little listening posts and people are
Mhm.
writing down, you know, like secret shoppers almost. But then
How do you
again,
get
what
them
do
to
you
tell
do
you
with
those
that
things?
info, you know?
Yep. Well, I think you're probably curating it back to your team. You know what I mean? Like, and then trying to build strategies from them essentially, but getting people to talk, getting people to tell you those things. I think that's where the magic is, because you're
Yeah.
starting to really learn your customer. All right, let's talk about some experiential stuff that maybe you've done, maybe things that you have felt you were trying to be experiential and it maybe didn't really hit the, you know, really do it. And then things where maybe you felt that you really were being experiential and your, you know, your customer, you know, they felt a certain way about it.
Yeah. I certainly have had all gamuts. I think the most recent one was what I just mentioned, the chef's night out in New
Yeah.
York. We loaded everyone on, it was about under 200, just under 200 people,
Mm.
loaded on double-decker buses from the hotel. They get to see Manhattan. It's an international audience, so that some of them had never, you know, either ridden around or had been
Yeah.
there. And then a dear friend of mine, Mark Murphy, who's on the Food Network, has an event space, and he helped us coordinate like a few different chefs. Esther Choi was there and some other chefs, and there were stations, and they got to go in and
Oh,
take
nice.
video of the guys cooking and then eat the food. And then there was past stuff, and we had oyster shuckers, and
Mhm.
it was just something. And then if like a customer of ours went up to Mark and so, my son loves you, like we just want to say hello, and he's like, give me your phone, and he calls the kid on FaceTime, and they're having a moment, and you just looked around and watched all of those moments happen. Or one time we did something at Charlotte at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, and people got to go down and ride with the drivers for like a lap or
Mhm.
two. And that was
Oh, wow.
years ago. And I still have people come up to me that are
Mhm.
NASCAR fans and say that that was like a
Yeah.
life-changing experience. So that's one of those things, like if you knew who was a NASCAR fan, you could have, you know, maybe even tailored that more. And
Yeah.
then from the non kind of like the misses, I'm just thinking, I mean, there have been plenty. I think maybe on the trade show floor, honestly, I think that's where it's a little more of a challenge, like I was
Yeah.
saying.
It is.
I've tried like all of the different, like I was saying, the headsets
Yeah.
or some of the activations, which I consider more like activities now than anything
Mhm.
else, that just like never got used, right?
Mhm.
So one
Absolutely.
time we did this big LED globe, and it was expensive, and you put it in the middle of this 7,500 square foot beautiful booth, and it's programmed. We had like our marketing team working like crazy to program it with like all of our different locations, and you were supposed to be able to go up to it, and interact with it and experience where our locations were. And number one, when we installed it, the bottom of it started to catch on fire. So we had to put that out. We fixed it. But then I swear to you, like one person went up to it the
Yeah.
whole time. And it was like a centerpiece that it felt like such a waste,
Yeah.
but why? Like it wasn't really, I guess it
Mhm.
wasn't personal, or people don't necessarily care. I
I
don't
think
know.
you have to be careful with technology, right? As a trade show and event partner with Rockway, like we have a lot of companies who come to us when they're exhibiting and they're like, oh, we want to use tech. We want to use a video. I want to use this. Our question is always like, how? Like, what is your customer going to do that intrigue? Like just using it just to use it. I have seen too often it just fall flat where no one uses it. No one does it. Is it meaningful? Are they going to learn something? Are they going to have fun? Are they going to be engaged? Are they going to have an aha moment? Are they going to connect the dots on messaging that you're trying to tell them? Or are they going to come up and play Pac-Man and leave? Like you have to be really clear. What are you using this, video wall for? So I think that's something that I would urge people for experiential when it comes to technology. Technology is amazing. A lot of cool stuff you can do, but you can't just use technology just to use technology. It always gets my brain thinking like, how do you think outside the box? Right? Like I think outside the box with a connection to something works. Like I always use the example of, when thinking about audience, like when I got married in 2019, right? We were talking about the food at our wedding, and where we got married, I knew the chef. He's amazing. And we were talking about food and they gave us some menu, and it's like a very much wedding menu thing. And I just remember looking at the menu, and my wife and I were talking to the chef, and I said, hey, chef, I said, what if I told you that I want you to cook whatever it is that you want and make the food however you'd like and serve it however you'd like? He started laughing. And he said to me, he goes, that would be amazing. And I said, well, that's what we're going to do. I said, I'll give you a budget. That's what we're going to do. And I said, I want people to feel like it's the best wedding food they've ever had. Sure enough, by not like the food was outstanding. I still to this day, 5, 6 years later, people are like, food at
Yeah.
your wedding was the best food I ever had in my life. So it's like sometimes for the sake of doing something different that stands out from the norm, which I think events is very relatable. Every event, same cadence, same register, same keynote, same flow. Do something different, change it up, grab their attention per se.
Yeah. I was at a kind of like not a think tank, but like an event put on in Vegas a couple months ago where it was a bunch of meeting professionals put on by a magazine. And one thing that stuck out to me was I walked in and they had all this different seating. Like they had high top tables on risers. They had a bar off to the side with chairs. They had your normal kind of round tables in the middle. And then they had even like some couch, like comfy seats.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to see like
Mhm.
people walk in and sit. Like you just assume that a meeting space should be round tables with crescent six chairs
Yeah.
and the way that people were like more relaxed. The whole point of this meeting was to talk about the next generation of conference goers, which I also
Mm.
think is a future amazing topic.
Yeah, very much.
But I was like, oh, duh. I mean, why wouldn't we have people experience a different way to sit? And they're gonna,
Yep.
I remembered it. I mean,
Yeah. Cassie, so tell me a little bit about like challenges you face, right? Obviously, you're running events, you're running trade shows, right? You're running dinners, activations, offsite. You have all these different things you're doing. What are some kind of challenges that you face when you're trying to create these experiences? What are roadblocks that maybe others might be encountering as well?
yeah, I already mentioned kind of the lean team. So, just resource problems alone are a challenge.
On that, I have a question. For someone like yourself, what are resources that you're missing or lacking that are in that area of challenge?
Yeah, that goes right into the next point I had about the challenge. So in my world, we have more events in a year than like, well, for sure one person could ever go to, but you don't need to go to all of them. But things kind of base level admin support, but like
Mm,
elevated admin support. So registrations, hotel rooms, invoice tracking, just kind of the nuts and bolts of things that need to be taken care of in order to have it run smoothly,
yeah.
which preaching to the choir out there. But so there's that. There's kind of like the admin of it all. Then there is the execution, which I think is almost a bigger challenge. Like I was saying to you before we started, was you've created this process that you have for an event. I can obviously execute it because I've been doing it for a very long time. But if you're not the one doing it, essentially, if I'm my own, brand or business, how do I scale myself? How do I
Yeah.
impart and have it done similarly? I mean, nobody's going to do it exactly the same, and that's okay. But so is that an internal? So resource, meaning if you're not allowed to hire an internal
Yeah.
person to work for the company, how do you go externally and then figure that sort of budget out as
Yeah.
well? And that's
And who
the
does it? What does that look like? Is it 1099? Is it a contract? Is it a company? Is it a service? Yeah.
agency. And then we run into all the budget, challenges that you have with that. You only have a certain amount of money to spend on an event. And so that's, I think, where I wrote here, hole in the market. I think that the DMC model, like you go into a city, you need to put on a certain kind of event, whether that's on the floor, off the floor, you need entertainment. Like I think that the DMC model, at least that I've experienced, needs to evolve, because traditionally you would hire them to help you with your entire event, and then the cost structure is a percentage on top of your spend.
Yep.
And then what I'm finding is my biggest thing is almost the sourcing, like expanding your network to create this very unique thing that I can probably enact myself, or I
Yeah.
have people that could help. But what I really need is the beginning part. And I don't have a team of people that I can say, okay, I'm showing up in Vegas. What do you got?
Yeah. You're talking offsite dinners, hotels, activations,
yeah.
places to go, services, right? You're talking all those things.
Exactly.
It's the research and knowledge.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
what they rightly need is to get paid. Like I totally get that. And
Mhm.
so they want a percentage to help do the entire thing, but I can't afford that. Like, just to be honest, like I
Yeah.
can either do the event myself or cut the event in half.
Yeah.
So because there's just not a lot of wiggle room anymore. I mean, our dollars are so thin, and the
What
prices.
is the percentage right now? What is it on total spend of your event
It depends on
for
the
the
company.
DMC?
Mostly I mean, around 20% of total spend, or just on food and beverage spend,
What
or
gets booked
yeah.
essentially? Yeah.
But
Yep.
it's just kind of a tack on, which depending on the amount you're spending could be
Yeah.
massive.
Yeah.
Or whereas I would really love to have maybe a
Yep.
consulting fee,
Yeah.
or, and I'm sure there's challenges on all sides,
Mhm.
because like I said, they need to also make money and pay their
Yeah.
employees.
There's hours and
So,
time put into it, knowledge.
um,
Yeah.
and if I end up not, like if they do all this work and then I decide to do something else in their current model, they don't always even get paid. It's like being a real estate agent, like unless the house sells, you're not, and I don't think that's quite
Yeah.
fair either. So
It's a good
anyway,
point on the
yeah.
DMC model. I think that's an interesting thing when it comes to resource. We have a question for you. Farah has a question. It's hi Cassidy. Just curious, what systems or software do you use to manage your events, small to large, from start to finish? Also, how large is the team you manage?
Sarah, I wish I like had a very smart answer for you on software. I don't have a set software. I'm certainly have met with a lot of different companies. That's another challenge. I am looking for an invite and reg kind of solution. So I'm not using anything right now. And I have one direct report right now. And I have over 200 events in a year. So I have one direct report, but then one also godsend angel who helps me, essentially is almost like a report, but she reports to somebody else. And then I have an amazing family, as I call them, of contract team, exhibit house, that we travel all over the world together. So there's three of them. So that's probably four or five. And then we have a marketing team who is amazing. That's like, I think we're eight, but they also have all of marketing to do for the company. So, we can't use them all for all the event stuff. So,
All right. So I want to get a little back. I want to move into the idea of like when creating, we talk about experiential, right? Because I think what people all want to do is they want to run an event, they want to run a trade show booth, they want to build out an experiential, some form of engagement or an experience for people that they remember, that helps convert helps build pipeline, right? That's what people are really trying to do. One of the kind of thoughts I have on this is like, when you're going to build something that's engaging, that people are going to at a trade show booth, at an offsite activation, at an event that they're going to do, it needs to be one of a few things. You can do fun, right? You can do learning. You can do something that connects the dots for them, right? You can deliver them just flat experience, right? Like you can put them in a NASCAR and have them drive around a track. Doesn't really connect the dots on anything, but it's fun and it's an experience and it's giving them something that they normally wouldn't have done that you've provided. So I think there's a lot of ways of doing those things. What it really makes me think is, what is the message as a host, as a trade show booth, as the person running the activation? What is the message that you want to deliver? What do you want people to walk away knowing? And I think if you know the audience and the customer and you know the message you want them to walk away knowing, that's when you can start thinking about how you engage them, right? For example, we work with a grocery store and we've pitched them, it's a big chain. We've pitched them a lot of different ideas over time. But like one of the ideas we pitched them one time was essentially this game where they would put food and different things on a scale and people had to guess how much the food weighed, right? So it really wasn't, they weren't, yeah, they were learning something, but they weren't learning anything that was game changing. It was more fun. It was like a cute, fun little thing to do, but it also tied back to who they were as a grocery store. And it reminded those people of those things. So I think it's like when you create these engagements and you make it experiential, you have to really be thinking about how it ties back to the brand, the message that you want to deliver, and who those people are, per se.
Yeah, and how complicated you make it for them, right? Like,
Yeah.
or it was probably fairly easy, hopefully, for them to walk up, guess the thing. We run into this all the time. I call it like the Chuck E. Cheese curse. At this one, we have one event every year that is not a massive booth. It's like 2 or 3 long rows of booths. So all of our customers have their own booths within our.
Got it. Yep.
We're setting it up for them, and there's 80 of them
Mhm.
at this show. And we always need a lead gen game. And
Mhm.
it's how many different ways can you have people walk around, pick up tokens, and go shopping? Like,
Mm.
and so we've tried every which way, and it seems the unsuccessful ways have been overly complicated. They have to go to the front desk, get their passport. So they give you a business card passport, then they go around and they get the
Mhm.
stamps and
Yeah.
they count them up and they get like the prize. And if it's a good enough prize, they might do it. But the targets that you really want to talk to are not interested in doing that at all. They're just
Mhm.
there to see their person. So I'd say that's where I've not failed, but like it wasn't as successful to have
Yeah.
an complicated game. And then on the flip side, there's a game that we call the treasure chest, and it's an acrylic box. You fill it with Veuve Clicquot, which who doesn't like that, or whiskey, depending on your audience.
Mhm.
And there's a bowl of keys, and somebody comes up and they choose a key, and if it opens the lock, they win. And I scream real loud, and everyone, claps in the booth, and it becomes a very fun. It is so non-committal that we
Yeah.
have a line that people will come by to play. So I think the experience in the booth, like I said, can be a real challenge and how you create it. And it seems like the more overcomplicated you make it on them, the less likely they are to do it.
Yeah. I mean, when you're in scenarios like that, it's like, what are you asking them to do? What's the ask? You know what I mean? Like, because people don't really want to be asked to do too much, but they also want to do fun things. So there's kind of a fine line. And I think at the end of the day, where I think a big shift in events that I am seeing is like, they are really going from being more of a market and a selling place that people feel they have to sell and market to being more of this connection and relationship building space. So it's like I'm urging people to do experiences, do trade show booths, and set themselves up, even when they're running their own events, to make real connection, to develop real relationship, because I think that's a little bit of the new sales at events. That's what you're looking to do with people. So you maybe don't need a lead gen game. You maybe don't need something that they go around with, that they stamp, that they're probably going to lose. that they really don't want to do. You don't have to come up with things just to come up with them, because it's hard. Like you're saying, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. And again, I guess we're still going back to the knowing your audience bit of
Yeah.
it. The real trend I'm seeing out there is, as with the budget, as I was mentioning, like the smaller the budget gets, you want to be real intentional and responsible with your company's money. I mean,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
investing this, and I take it very seriously to make sure we're getting stuff out of it. So what we've been doing is cutting the booth size a little bit at a time, and then using the extra money to do something more experiential, like
Hmm.
on the outside where you're inviting a select group. And then that also becomes a bit of a challenge, because it's like, well, who gets invited? So
Yeah.
is it better to have a come one, come all to my happy hour and everybody's drinking and your sales team gets a chance to say hello to everyone,
Hmm.
or a smaller group where you're having a conversation for the
Yeah.
evening, and they're probably, from the people I've polled, they seem like they both have a reason to exist. So
I think one of the trends that we're seeing is like when it does come to trade show and large third party conferences, one that I'm seeing essentially is like, well, people are starting to host their own micro events. People
mhm.
are starting to do more mobile, on the road, go to people things. And there's people that are just throwing more offsite activations where they want to have the invite, they want to have the control. I think if you have the right third party, if you have the right association and show where you're getting a combination of prospects, pipeline, and current customers, you can go all in with a trade show booth with activations offsite and marry up an entire campaign into it. But you have to be selective, like you're saying, about what you do in your trade show booth versus what you do offsite. And can you connect those experiences together with invitations and knowing what is the conversations and what does everything look like when you're meeting with them? You got to give them a reason to want to come to your trade show booth, to want to come over, and
Right.
not that they're just going to get pitched.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think since 2020, we're just sort of, I mean, everything is just not gone crazy, but it kind of has. I mean, we're sort of trying all these different things after
Yep.
we were forced to do wine tastings via webinar for
Yeah.
however long we had to do them. And now the game has changed. And that's why
Mhm.
I think, what you guys are doing next week, these conversations, there's a lot of us out there,
Mhm.
great experience and knowledge. So just even sharing like what's working and not working. And then like something you mentioned about knowing you said something about like knowing your partner, or I
Yeah.
almost said like knowing your collaborators.
Yeah.
I wrote that really big on my list, because as you're creating these curated experiences, you need someone on the partner side that gets you. Like I was saying, the conference we just did in New York, we were at the Standard Hotel in the Meatpacking District.
Mhm.
Amazing hotel. Shout out to the Standard. But I worked with the salesperson there, Haley, and I mean, I can't tell you how amazing it was to have someone also suggest,
Yeah.
like, hey, you could do this and it will still be within your budget. I've seen somebody
Yep.
XYZ, like, helping you. You don't always get that. I think I keep a list of like, it's like Cassie's little hospitality list of people that I would hire in a second if I ever got
Yeah.
the chance. And those are people you really want on your
Yeah.
team. But anyway, it was a great experience. I would encourage anyone to
That's
go.
great to hear. And I think that example for me, when you start talking about event marketing in general, first of all, the cost of events are still high. They used to be high. They're now even higher. They just continue to go up in general, right? So I think one of the things that people, if you're a hotel, if you're a DMC, if you are a exhibit house, if you're an experiential activation company, whatever it is that you are, that you support event marketers, you have to evolve, because budgets are not just like tripling, right?
Yeah.
So how can you provide those services? How can you go above and beyond? Where do they need help? I think that's a creative way of just being more resourceful for
Yeah.
people when they're trying to put on an event, because they have an end goal for this event, right? And if you don't know what that end goal is and you're a partner and you're just saying, oh, well, I can build you a booth, you're probably not a really good partner. You need to understand why they are there, what their goals are, who they are engaging with, what the outcomes it is that they want. Then I think once you understand all those things, whether you're the Standard Hotel, whether you are the exhibit house, whether you're a designer, it doesn't matter. You can now gravitate to those things and help them execute.
Yeah, a photographer of,
Yeah.
whoever, like whatever partner. And I see Teresa talking about how people are longing for connection and interaction, which is 100%, I feel like the message in this experiential world is that they're longing to connect with each other, our sales teams and customers, it's all about them connecting. And a big piece of that for me is also in the hospitality, like I was saying, setting up these experiences. It really comes back to this ultimate hospitality. I'm kind of like nerding out right now over this. I have this book back here, Unreasonable Hospitality. If you guys haven't read it or just looked up look up a podcast about it, you can get the
Yeah.
bits and pieces. Will Guidara, but he says that the key to hospitality is turning ordinary transactions into extraordinary experiences. And it just, you're like, ooh, goosebumps. Like I want, and that could be in any level, from if you're the salesperson, if you are the order taker, if you're just the person answering the phone, even like Cody, like emailing me about next week, like it creates, I'm excited. Like she's very responsive, feel warm. I'm looking forward to it. Like it's important. So,
I think it's such a good point that you make. And it's thinking about again, like I said in the beginning, when people think experiential, they think the big stuff. They think the physical engagements. They think these things that need to be dreamed up, right? And it's not that it's not those things. It is. Like there are cool things, like we did something for a client where they did like a silent disco and there was a DJ, but then there was a column. And like they have like these, it was a silent DJ because they're a chemical company. So they have these mixing compounds, like mixing like a DJ. So they did these lights. So it's like a whole thing, right? Whole thing, a little bit above my head, but a whole thing. And it made sense. But like, that's only one example. And I think the things that you're talking about is how do you take ordinary moments and turn them extraordinary? That is also just as experiential. And frankly, the direction that things are going with people wanting to feel like they belong, having connection, truly networking. Don't just put me in a freaking room at a bar and expect me to be able to network, because some people can and some people cannot. So how do you create that in your events? And I think those little teeny tiny things that you can add to make somebody's event that much better, that thoughtfulness, that little touch point, upping the energy level by a nice email, by connecting people ahead of time. It's really thoughtfulness. There's a great example in that book that you're talking about where there was a family that was eating in the restaurant and essentially they had never seen snow before. And it was a family with kids. And the guy who wrote the book, who was running the restaurant, basically told one of his staff members to run to the store and buy sleds, and basically brought the sleds back, went to the family and said, we're going to take you to Central Park to go sleigh riding, give them sleds to go do it. So like, there's just, it's thoughtful. You're looking at a family that's never been around snow or never been sleigh riding before. Right.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
it's just,
and it's
that's knowing your
equally
audience.
for the person enacting the service and the person receiving the service can be equally as impactful. Like it brings me insane joy to, watch people, go through an experience.
I think one of the big things that we're touching on and we're getting to is like the lineation of this is essentially that I think in 2019, before COVID and everything, people were just going through the motions with events and we took them for granted, right? Huge pause. No one went, no one could go. I think companies realized that businesses are more of a catalyst for commerce than they thought. So they wanted to get back to them. People missed going to events. We got back to events and everybody just barged into them. But now people are like, whoa, hold on a second. What are we doing here at these events? And what most people are learning, and I think people have to get to the point with, is you have to find a way. If you are a company and a sponsor and an exhibitor, you have to find a way to do two things, in my opinion. One is you have to deliver a message and you have to make sure that message is received, right? And the second is meaningful interaction. You can't go just to go. How do you get meaningful interaction with an attendee, with an audience member? And then I think the flip on the coin of that is if you're an attendee, if you're going to events, you're looking for experience. You're looking to feel like you belong. You're looking to feel like you're with your tribe. So that's what people are there for. And somehow we have to find a way to turn that into commerce, to turn that into business, because if there is no business, there is no event, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's the ecosystem.
I got my pen out.
Yeah, good.
Say those two again. The 2 points you said that are important.
Oh, when it comes to
Yeah,
so exhibitor. So
that's
I think there's
great.
two things. One, like my main thing is like a message. Like, what do you want
Yeah.
your audience to leave? Like, what are you conveying to them? What do you want to leave knowing about you? I think because you're not going to deliver 10 messages to people. You can't have a bunch of writing up on a wall. And that to me goes back to like your theme, your booth, your activations, like everything that you do. What is this overarching thing that you want people to leave thinking about you? Right? I think you have to know that. And then I think two is you're trying to think to yourself, how do I meaningfully connect with my audience? And by meaningfully is like, that's where I'm asking people to like reverse engineer what they're thinking. I was doing a consulting call the other day and talking to somebody, and they were asking me about the way we ran our podcast in our trade show booth. And as I started dissecting down why we did it, he was like, wow. I said, yeah, because like, I don't want to stand in my booth and just grab people and pull them in and set meetings and say, come talk to me so I can do strategy and build a trade show booth and design one for you, right? But when I say to you, hey, really interested in your thoughts on experiential marketing, or I'm interested in your thoughts on A, B, and C in the industry, and you come over to the booth to do a podcast interview, it's all about you. I'm giving you the stage. You're the platform to talk, right? So I'm getting you over there stress-free. We then set up the rest of our booth. So it was easy. My salespeople weren't just like swarming over and like, what company are you with? How many booths do you have? Right? Like, it wasn't like that. We were like, hey, we have this really cool raffle going on. We're giving away a staycation in your city. We had whole like really high-end cool prizes. And basically we had this engagement table that we built. And we basically said, hey, what is your biggest problem you're trying to solve with your trade shows and events right now? And there were 6 boxes and they were lit up and they had activation. And basically it was a hotel room key card, because essentially our thing was Hotel Rockaway, and you put it in that one. And then you were entered in a prize to win something in those things. So then now, if that was the end of the interaction, we listen to you talk on a podcast. We know what your feelings are on events. We have your name, we have your email, right? We know what company you work with, and we also know what problem you have. So the next question for our sales team was to them, hey, is there anything I can do or anybody I can connect you with to help solve this problem for you?
Totally stealing all your ideas right now.
It's fine. Yeah, no, I just think, yeah, it's okay. That's what I'm here for. Yeah.
Yeah. Is this a consulting call or am
I
I?
guess it is now. It's turned into one. That's fine.
No, you guys, you got the good stuff. Like those two things are very, I think, sum up this whole discussion, and experience falls into, well, into both, but into number two.
It does. It does.
It's just a word that I think it's a word that has become so like, I need an experience, but people aren't sure what or why or
Agreed.
how or, all those things. So that's
And how do you do it? Look, the how do you do it is tough. I think exhibitors and sponsors, they have it tough. They're spending money. But at the end of the day, like if the best you're getting is a meaningful interaction, that is what you want. You're trying to, right? Like, so you can't just go to go and feel like you're going to get in front, like make it meaningful, get to know them, understand them, learn those people. And I think if you can do that, easier said than done, but that's, to me, that is the basis of the conversation when you're going to a trade show or an event, or at least that's the basis of our conversation. That's what we're trying to derive so that we can help provide people with exhibits and strategy and design and things of that nature, right? So as an exhibitor, that's how I would be thinking, because I think that's the new wave of trade shows. If you think you're just going to pop open a booth at a conference that relatively has your audience, and then you're just going to have people walk up to you and want to buy shit, like it's just not going to happen. It's not the way it works.
Throw $1 million at a private venue and load it up with a band and whatever, it's going to just fall flat. I mean,
exactly.
We've all experienced it, and life is hard. Like people,
it's difficult to do.
More in need of, personal interaction than they ever were before. So I think
events
for
are difficult.
That love this and like live and breathe it, like I can tell that you do, I'm so happy that I'm excited for the industry. I think that will continue to evolve. And as long as we all, work together on it. And in the end, like I said, I'm stealing your ideas, but there are no, secrets out there. This is not
Nope.
some like, let me show you how to make $1 million online. Like,
Yeah.
there's no secrets out here. So it's
If I
just
knew how to make $1 million online, I would tell you, Cassidy.
me
Promise.
too, me
Yeah.
too.
No, I think I'm seeing a lot of I'm seeing better work out there. I'm seeing companies push boundaries. I'm seeing exhibitors ask better questions and event marketers seeking to do things differently and people kind of opening their minds. So I think we're getting there. I think it's just more conversations like this. It's more people hopping, I mean, what we held close to 30 people on this call for 60 minutes, right? Listening and talking about these things. And I think it's just a matter of pushing the conversation forward because everybody's going to have to throw a little spaghetti on the wall. This is the only way it works.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm happy. I can see my info's out there. You guys just message me with anything. I mean, I'm happy to just discuss or get on the Zooms or however else. So it's
Awesome.
been a pleasure.
Well, Cassidy, thanks for doing this. I like keeping it directly to an hour because I feel like we just get the
Yeah.
most time. Just promise people an hour. Awesome. Everybody shows up. I don't know the date of our next show. I want to say 2 or 3 weeks. I'm not 100% sure, but it'll be on my LinkedIn. You can see the actual schedule and who we have and guests that are coming up for more conversations. Greatly appreciate everybody being here. Cassidy, you were awesome. Appreciate your insight. Appreciate your honesty. And I look forward to actually meeting you in a week. I get to see you in person.
Can't wait. And thanks you guys so much. So
Awesome.
see you guys around. Be well.
Adios, everybody. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here today.